The Aitape district of Sundown, a better region of the Sepik. People who live along the north coast depend on fishing and farming for their livelihood. They are predominantly Catholic. In fact, the first missionaries made their inroad from this corner of Papua New Guinea. Catholics celebrated 100 years of that historic event just 3 years ago on Tumleo near Aitape. Spiritually enriched, the people live in peace and harmony. The 12,000 of people who live in that area concentrate in main communities or villages scattered along the waterfront. Warupu is the most populated. The others are Arop, Malol, and Sisano. The villages are typical of coastal communities where bush material houses surround classrooms and churches built with corrugated iron, timber, and cement. This part of Papua New Guinea has been at peace with nature for decades until the evening of Friday, July 17, 1998. Tidal waves as high as power poles and speeds of several hundred kilometers an hour flattened the communities. The 4 villages of Arop, Warupu, Malol, and Sisano were directly in front of the Tsunami waves. It was triggered by a massive earthquake about 30 kilometers offshore. Measuring 7 on the Richter scale, the earthquake generated devastating waves that caused Papua New Guinea's worst natural disaster on record. The dead will never know what happened. It will take all of their lives for the survivors to come to terms. Friday evening, July 17th, was no different to any other day for the people here. If there was anything new, a school play and a disco were planned for that evening in one of the villages. Everyone thought nothing of the earthquake that rocked the area just before or a little after 6 o'clock. Many of those have occurred in that part of the country before. The rest of the villagers settle into their homes, either having or preparing dinner.
Mi prime saksak.
We got big plastic stuff inside long house.
Prime sta lopayan na kuria ikam.
Time plasta lausin. Plasta kut na em trapla gurya kama. Na mi pla pred rone gadan tamdana.
Mi plaram sound plusina. Mi plaram katan lower.
The people were too preoccupied or simply had no reason to notice that the tide may have been too low and at an unusual time immediately after the earthquake.
I remember we were having a beer and drinking some beers, and we were having dinner, and when the earthquake struck, in fact we were sitting there with two priests and some local people, and they were telling us that this was only a minor earthquake, not too bad in fact. And we went outside, and people were telling us that the water was withdrawn a long way out of from the shore, so we could see all the coral just laying, and it came back very slowly. So we had a discussion with the local people about tidal waves, and in fact they said the last tidal wave was in 1907.
Experts believe that the water had been drawn out to the open sea forced by the earthquake and then released back to the beach, but not as a gradual high tide. The Tsunami Wave struck the coastline at hundreds of kilometers an hour, bulldozing and drowning everything in its path.
As soon as see Brooklyn place do that. So me yet and Mr. Losera, me blow walk Losera, and me come back and me walk about numbers come down. Me come sir Lucy line from come down the and me look him trap like Guria Strelum. Slahap and time me let tanning Lulu Slasolwara and close to the same brook. So me run one tap through my back, me calabloganas. Time me calabloganas, me doing something and covering me penis. So somehow I see come the side and me Lucy me survive and taloganas.
Lug-lug ko ang Solwara mak blau straight em kananta.
Time solwara kam all breed ron kat side na. Like ron kat solwara kam pamimol antem gate na antem more speaker antem more yang plau line on itanis.
Sikam peng mi blau kata. Pakarap mi blau kata. Mi plus senap straight all house belum mi blau something belum blau improve. Something improve, ang pundahan ko rin, mi blau lukin makatok-tok. So mi blau suppose lo inday, so lo sabi, big man na mi stop.
Trapla siga na karama pinita. Role mi blau kam strelo. Trapla lagune. Emna mi blau sedang talol pipia.
I think it was before the second earthquake that there was this terrible noise. And lots of the village people came out because we were quite close to their villages, their homes. And we were all just standing there in silence, just wondering what on earth this noise was. I'd never heard anything like it before. And then the people started running down towards the beach just to see what it was. And I don't know what it was. Something in me just said it's a tidal wave. I don't know why, because I've never been through a tidal wave before. And it was just this horrific noise, and I just said, it's a tidal wave. And so Sister Regina, beside me, she screamed out with me to tell them to come back, it's a tidal wave. And thank God a lot of them did come back. After that, things happened so fast.
I think this disaster along the north coast of Aitape district is on the same scale as the Mount Lamington eruption down in Papua in 1950. We estimate now, after one day of looking at the disaster, that there are at least 1,000 dead. Many bodies are still lying on the shore, many are still floating in the lagoon.
Within about 6 minutes, the time it took for 3 different wave patterns to hit and then retract, villages were gone, a generation eliminated, and thousands displaced in their minds and from their birthland.
The very serious ones is 7, and this is the 8. I think there are 3 more there, but there are others are still around here.
On Saturday, July 18th, news of the tidal wave and its trail of death and destruction reached mission and government authorities in Aitape, Vanimo, Wewak, and ultimately Port Moresby.
Name please.
Julie Gruga.
Yeah.
Yes.
Julie na.
Julie, Mary.
Julie. Apa?
Desi.
Huh?
Desi. DESSY.
Coordinated rescue operations went into swing about 18 to 24 hours later. Before that, survivors at the disaster zone had to overcome their own state of shock, fear, and pain to help those seriously injured. And there were many of them, particularly children.
Times kore come up and we pin kalap long boat. Na mi trip. Na time si kam na mi tawni mi want them boat long mi. Want them family below me. We pin losing one black picnic below me. Pin is now mi pin sumi ko suwa na mi say mo sam long line long glacier. Lik mangi. Pin puti mo lo boat ken. Na mi simo ko suwa long upside long glacier long. Nemas na behind we been kisimol man long all man very long night kisimol kam the bush long hamsor kam high the mountain we come bring more finish na ko beken say mol samla line ken
We black kisimol sa Lake Brook line, black pinsay mall karamol ko putin long. Al tokta si pingam cheki mall na mumu mall of the line. Iko adlo Wewak na wani mo.
The calm, collective, and uncompromising manner in which the injured help the injured remains the untold strength of the people themselves.
This is Delta Sierra, this is Delta Sierra. Is there anyone on air, please? Is there anyone on air? We've had a terrible disaster here. Is there anyone on air? This is Delta Sierra.
The Catholic mission sister Margaret Conway witnessed a great deal of what happened and sent out the first alarm.
All I know is that night, when we had so many of them coming into our house and none of us nurses, and all we could do was get out Dettol, a bit aquaflavine and bandages and sticking plaster and try and clean them up. And as they got worse with the breaks and these huge gashes when you would have to be stitched, I ran up to the sked to just try and get help, just to see if there was anyone who could send help to us. So I just called out on the sked that night, is there anyone on air, is there anyone listening? I was really desperate. We worked almost right through the night with the people, and then the next morning, first thing, I ran up again when I couldn't get anyone the night before. And thank God Brother Stephen was on the sked, and I just said the same as I had the night before. Is there anyone on air? Is there anyone at all? This is Delta Sierra, and we've had a terrible disaster here and we need help quickly. And then Brother Stephen's voice came up and I think I could have hugged him through the sked. It was just such a relief that somebody in the outside knew at long last that something had happened, and I sort of left him then to do what he had to do in Aitape, and the next thing it was Lena and another nurse, George, came, and I think I sort of relaxed at that minute because it was such a relief to see her.
Well, it was shocking because everybody was already here and they were victims, children and adults with broken limbs, arms, some with sticks still poking through their limbs, like the leg. So there was no time to stand around and watch and whatnot. Like Sister Margaret was already here, and she did her best, but she just rested them. She collected everybody and she left them there in front of a classroom. So when I came, we got straight to work. We dropped down our bags and quickly ran through the patients that were there already, the victims. And I had an assistant, another nurse, CHW George. So I was identifying the patients and I got him to quickly put up drips to some of them who were in shock. And Jack Seroyd, the seminarian you met, was assisting there with assisting George trying to put up drips.
Rescue from outside the disaster zone came primarily from missionaries. They were among the first to reach the injured.
I stepped on the boat and went straight to this disaster area just to check out what was really going on. But it's hard to... I've never been in a situation like this, so it was very hard to picture what really the problem was. And so it took, I think, 1.5 hours to reach the spot by boat, and just came to the shore, and it was absolutely devastating what was happened, because it was, in my opinion, it was one of the most beautiful spots in this area, and the whole village was absolutely gone, and there were no houses more standing, and people were lying on the beach and were totally devastated, swollen faces and broken arms and bones, and everybody was just wandering around like a very idealistic situation. And
when this thing happened, Brother James contacted us and said, how can we help? And somebody said, we need helicopters. And he had the contact.
The first ones to respond was Highlands Gold at Freda River, Paul Green. I rang him and asked him if there was any chance of a helicopter, because there was a disaster at Wanimo. The only question he asked was how long did I need a helicopter for, and I wasn't able to tell him. I said 1 day, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, I've no idea. That was the only question he asked, and he said get back to me in 10 minutes, which I did, and he said there'll be a helicopter off the ground in 5 minutes.
They just dropped everything. Himself, Paul Green and Merv, the pilot, they just dropped everything and came. And they worked untiringly from all day, all Saturday, 6 o'clock Sunday to 6 o'clock Sunday night, all day Monday, just shuttling patients in. And it was a fantastic, and also I really felt when I was on the beach there with Paul, you could see he was really affected. He was really concerned about the people and how can we do more. He mentioned there was 5 bodies down on the lagoon there. We went and had a look at them, and then I walked around the lagoon, found another 7 bodies. I think 10 of them were children, 2 of them were adults. And I heard a splashing noise, and there was a woman holding onto the side of a canoe there. And I called Paul down, and we got this woman out of the water. She'd also fractured a femur, and carried her up to the helicopter for an airlift.
Other choppers and fixed wings from Vanimo Air, Heavy Lift, and charters were later involved in what was a fairly large-scale airlifting of injured to safety and for medical treatment.
I then went to Wanimo Trading, and they immediately put their 3 planes at our service and went down to MAF and they made their planes available. So we had the 5 planes all together working for 3 days, getting in the supplies that were necessary, and more importantly bringing out the injured people.
Some 24 to 30 hours after the Tsunami Wave struck, nearly 100 seriously injured were airlifted to Aitape Hospital and 7 to Vanimo. By Sunday, large numbers of injured were airlifted to both Vanimo and Aitape, as well as Wewak.
The first couple of days, it was, you can imagine, 100, 150 people just laid out on the floor waiting to go into theatre. No telephones. It was like a real disaster area.
The busiest of the hospitals was Raihu in Aitape. The ironical background to this health facility is that the Catholic mission which runs the hospital decided to shut it down on Friday, the day of the tragedy.
Closed down because the funds had not come for a long period to run the health services in the diocese. And so Raihu Health Centre and 10 health sub-centres around the diocese were all shut down because of shortage of funds on that day, that very day, several hours before the tidal wave hit.
But the next day, Saturday, Raihu became the nerve centre, a major relief operation where lives were saved. By Saturday evening, 95 patients had to be treated.
The most impressive case, I think, was a child of about 10 years old who came here with a cast around the leg, and I saw through the bandage that the leg was severely injured. So I took her to theatre. I saw the leg, I knew it was going to be amputated, so I talked to the mother who was there, and she agreed on it. She saw the leg too. I amputated, and the same night she died, this child. And the mother was so exhausted that she fell asleep with the child in her arms. And when I came the next morning, she was sleeping there with the dead child in her arms. It was really a very sight that I still remember, and it's heartbreaking.
For the medical personnel, nurses and doctors, Raihu may well have been a busy city hospital. Within 2 weeks, they had to carry out 208 major surgeries. That's the number even the well-established hospitals could not describe as normal.
I think the hospital changed in a sort of mesh scene, like, you know, the series Mesh. That was a sort of impression I had, because all these helicopters came in every 50 minutes. We had this chopper coming in, brought in like 10 totally devastated people. We had people waiting with stretchers, brought them into the wards, and we did the assessment over there, and from there people were divided for x-rays or the serious cases in Ward 1 and 2, and we tried to put up a system as good as we could, and of course we were not equipped or not ready for a situation like that.
Well, we didn't have much supplies at that stage. We couldn't work sterile, for instance. We just had to wash the material as soon as possible and soak them in iodine for 10 minutes, and then we could reuse the scissors again. There was no other way. We only had 5 pair of scissors or something. We didn't have enough sterile gloves, and there was no gauzes, so we used cotton wool and all these things. Until Sunday, we asked already for supplies, and then things were made available, and we could improve our standard of work. But at that time, there was no other way. We just had to improvise and just get patients in and patients out, and the next one in. Just continue working from, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock at night.
Basically, he's got a fractured femur, and the mother held the child during the big wave. And this one here, I think it's about 3 weeks we leave the child in traction. And also the child can exercise a little bit because you can move around, and being a very small baby of 3 months, it should heal very quickly. Grace came in with an injury where the bone was exposed. Quite a large wound there, the bone was exposed. We had this Dr. Roger Weeks, the orthopaedic surgeon, and it was very important to cover up the bone. So what he's done over here is extended, cut through here so that the skin came over, covered the bone with muscle, and it's taken quite well. She had another injury on the leg here. A lot of the patients here have got 2 or 3 injuries, not just one injury. And our infection is the big problem. We've got to make sure they're very, very clean. So far we've done just about 208 operations in the 2 weeks. It's healed up quite well. The bone was exposed. It was actually a flap coming down, and the flap's been put back and sutured up. There's still a little bit of a thing there.
The medical attention was crucial in the initial stages, but in these situations, the more personal and human touch was important, particularly for the injured children. This is where Franciscan brother Gary Hill came in.
If the child or the young child trusts you, parents tend to trust you, and they make it easier for you to treat a child. If a child comes in screaming and he's scared of you, it's very hard to listen to his chest, to have a look in his ears. If a child trusts you and will come over and sit on your knee, and you can look at him and examine him. So I carry on a bit with one of these little thingos that goes down and goes dot, 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 dot. And the kids can play with this, and before they know it, they're fully examined. And just to have something different, coming in the ward with flashing lights on your head or something. I mean, you don't do it every day, but it's just an entertaining thing.
As it turned out, the disaster sent over 700 people to hospitals as inpatients. Raihu could not cope. Many had to be transferred to Vanimo, the provincial hospital of the Sundown province. Initially, 7 injured were sent to Vanimo on Saturday. The next day, Sunday, the hospital was flooded. By Monday, 3 days after the tidal wave, the hospital was still in an emergency situation. Many seriously injured were on the edge of life and death. Here, doctors tried unsuccessfully to save a woman, her death witnessed by Prime Minister Bill Skate, who had gone to the disaster site. As medical supplies were running low in both Raihu and Vanimo and personnel exhausted, an Australian Defence Force medical unit flew into Vanimo and immediately set up a field hospital. The Australians relieved the locals by working on some of the seriously injured.
So the survivors have mainly leg, arm injuries, a lot of soft tissue injuries where wood and other objects have penetrated skin, driving coral and mud deep into the wounds, producing this very infective mix that threatens limbs and at this stage threatens life.
A young guy named Sebastian, and he's got some burn and graze type marks on his legs. But what we've also found is, as you can probably see, there's a fair bit of swelling in both feet, and that's actually gas gangrene. And if he doesn't have an operation in our surgery tonight, his feet probably won't make it.
One of the unfortunate but life-saving medical decisions was amputations. In Vanimo, 4 had to be carried out. One of them was on 10-year-old Sebastian from Malol village.
You're doing very well, Sebastian.
Sebastian's medical journey from Malol to Vanimo did not end there. Together with many other patients, he flew to Wewak.
Now, Brooklyn, screw, Brooklyn, go inside, more. Go. Push him, hand, go inside.
This is where all the aftercare treatment was provided, particularly for the amputees as well as those with nerve injuries. Sebastian then became part of a group of amputees under the care of Peter van der Bos, a physiotherapist of the Wiwe Kalang services.
We are exercising to get this leg strong and to get his hand strong, so by the time that he can get an artificial limb, he's strong enough to walk.
Down, push strong, come on top, up, you go on top, you go on top, you go on top.
1, 2, 3.
From a painful and traumatic journey from Malol to Vanimo and on to Wewak, at least a smile, just a small laugh among the patients was a big difference. The aftercare in Wewak has proved successful for some. There are those who showed remarkable recovery, but there are also those who will take a long time, or never.
This is Iliakus. He comes from Arop. Arop was in the middle of the tidal wave. He's one of the 4 patients that we have with a brachial plexus lesion. That's where a part of the nervous system is damaged, and this arm is not working at all. So this is Pauline. She has the same kind of condition as Eliarus. Only in her arm there's a little bit of movement possible, so we are exercising her already. But how it's going to look like in the long term is very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Good.
In all disasters, whatever the magnitude, however tragic, and wherever they might be, there are extraordinary accounts of heroic actions, miracle survivals, as well as some cruel outcomes. Aitape had several of those. This woman lost her husband and 4 of her 7 children.
Mi karem ligligeu antem naraplaya mi olimem mi plus swim na si pauli mi plapinis na mi lusim tu plapinis mi no sabe lo tu planau mi koplo mi yet em tu koplo em yet ligligel koplo em yet morning blessed up big night mi praying up to light big pla Maria, Selina, I'm cry, Mama, Mama, you help me. Selina, yeah, Mama, Mia, me help me now. Me walk about this easy. Patanda bla mangoro ko, me kare me. Me do bla brave finish, me bla ko, bla grab nonggudo lik ya. All kisi mem. Msili pantaplo aus morota nakat lo em na ketrut kol sampla lain kisimem ko antaplo bus mi kolo ketana na mi pumim em na mi kerai lo em lo sem na mi dog molnes mi like mi ketrut mas kampante Selina na ales pam plastawantem.
This young mother lost her husband as well. The child she has now was only 3 weeks old on July 17th. Her fight against the might of the tidal wave to save her is quite an extraordinary story. The mother is now in Vanimo.
Spontaneously, she pressed the baby to her breast, and it was the only way
to save her. And when she was covered there with the water, the only things that she did, it was to lift up the baby above her head and to keep the baby above the water. After that, she surfaced, and then she was able to take the baby to safety. And she did that just because she was asking the Lord to give her strength. When finally she was able to land somewhere, she was without the other child there, Goretti. And providentially somebody called her name, and he told her that Goretti was close by, and eventually she was able to gather together her two children. And they are here, still safe and sound.
In another sad story, this woman also lost her husband and children. The baby was born immediately after the tragedy.
Agnilla is from Aro. During the tidal wave, she lost her husband and her 3 children. Last night in the care center at Po, she gave birth to a new son here. Worried? Yeah.
Papa plenty. Lose business.
Sikisimi gosolo mangoro na minu sawlo na migo start to migo tahon pas lawan pla house na dia pas lagi mino mistap ko na morning. Or sample line slip lo bus kamera na met singa tu mor kamna katim diwana rosig leg bumi. Mama bumi stop na papa bumi day one time one pla lily baby bumplana narapla brada osem narapla brada again and dia ini die.
In all these amazing cases of bravery, miracle survivals, or as some describe it, returning from hell, there are some soul survivors who lost not just families, but a whole lot of relatives. Several of them see their own survival as not a blessing, but further punishment.
A lot of people cannot still come to terms with a great loss. And others who have lost the mother, parents, the mothers who have lost their children, the husband who have lost their wives and children, these are still days, still shock. When I talk to them and when the counselors go out, they are still very depressed. And with the depression, there's a lot of weakness. They're not thinking properly. They're not in the condition to decide for themselves.
This church service 3 weeks later at Talis was packed to capacity. But immediately after the Mass, the people couldn't wait to get away from the sea and the lagoons.
They're all going up back to the bush where they said there's 4 camps there. One is Kunai, that belongs to Big Malol. That's Amsor Manyawian. And Tanyibin is going up to their own pit of land up in the bush. Nobody's staying down in the village.
Why?
They're all just too scared. That's the answer they're going to give you. We tried to convince them to come back and stay at the upper part of where the station is. But it will take some time, I think.
Healing the minds and the wounds is perhaps only half of the rehabilitation process. The other is coming to terms with the sea, the beaches, the lagoons. These have been part of the people's way of life for decades. They receive from them their fun and food and hide in them their secrets and beliefs.
On the Saturday morning early, we knew they'd found little babies in the barrack there and the barrack down this way. Somebody then told me that Teles was washed out. A little girl was brought up to us. She was dead, they'd found her. We took her down on the tractor to try and find the mother. We couldn't find the mother or the father who she belonged to. We finally found the family. And then I just jumped off the tractor at the Yallingi and I walked down to Teles just to see if there were people down there needing a hand. And I met mama after mama after mama with little tiny babies. And each time when I went to put a little sign of the cross in their foreheads, they were cold, they were dead. I didn't cope real well at all. The mamas were going off to plant them. I got more and more upset as I went along because there would have been about 8 or 9 that I met. Then I left that and I came back and went across to Big Malol. And then I saw just dead bodies everywhere. I think I was as stunned as the people were. You felt so helpless. I felt, what on earth's, what's happened here?
Mi plaul que te está poniendo lo plan blue, Papa. The family blue mi plan no stop blue. Oli golo bus pinis, oli hide number sampla. Family mi plan lusimol. Papa mi asking you, blessimol que te line blue mi oli die lo ye. On our play kisi maybe on our play have lo tidal wave. Grim strong na only stop lo bus, only hide, only losing place. Papa mi talk thank you lo you. Na you give more nupla strong, lo only start him nupla walk about long all can. Long all picnic blonde play loose lo this lo ha. Papa mi asking you. Kisi spirit long all. Give me malolo long all.
The exact number of people killed will not be known for a long time. The number has been put so far at 2,200. Bodies that could be found received some sort of dignified burials. Many were not. The Sisano Lagoon is believed to be one spot where many of the dead are today. It's now out of bound, and debates continue over whether the lagoon should be declared as a national mass grave.
And now, as I go back to these places, and as I look over this emptiness, these desolate, haunted places of skeletons, dead bodies, debris everywhere, broken coconuts and trees with not a single stump of post standing, I just simply couldn't help but to weep openly.
And that in just about 6 minutes on Friday, July 17th, 1998. Papua New Guinea's worst natural disaster in its history.
Ai wara pun down
long I belong me, take me looking long EMTV, long Friday night, long moon July, tidal wave, long Aitape. Mi karay na mi wari long on, you me asking Papa God, marmari long all geta. Sore, sore Aitape Tsunami, ni pilipin long you. Sore, sore Aitape Tsunami, ni karay long you. Give me Papua New Guinea, please come. Na yumi bunga, na halibong olay long Aitape. Please hide and cry, belong pikinini. Papa, mama, belong only stop with. You me my strong, long step them all wrong. Help him lick, lick, pikinini. Only future belong you me.